I like to say I didn't sell out, I sold in. I think that first year we acquired 25 million in EBITDA. So I think at this point we're like about 110 million top line with, I don't know, 30 million EBITDA. Nobody's ever seen anything like this.
Affinity Partners, you had that meeting with them. Obviously, EBITDA was really important to them. You guys were growing really, really fast. What was the one thing that they dug into you guys that kind of took you by surprise?
Everybody says, be careful, private equity. They show up with smiles, right? But in the background, you know what I mean? They've got like, you know, sledgehammers. I remember like I would be in a car with her and I'd be like, Mom, someday, like I'm gonna live in a neighborhood like this. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I just knew, like I always had that drive.
So Jason, thank you so much for coming on to the second time we've done a podcast. The first one I just mentioned to you there was phenomenal. I feel like I'm still hyped up from it and I got such great feedback from it as well. So first of all, thank you for that. But again, I think that was last February. Since then, so again, I don't think you need any introduction. I think anybody that's in the SEO search space knows who Jason Hennessy is. But since then, you guys have sold. So you built Hennessy Digital and you've now sold to Herringbone. And I believe you're still on the board, is that right?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you all the story, but I want to thank you too, because a couple people from our podcast reached out to me and said that they watched the episode. So you have a fan base, so that. And then the second thing is thank you for also including me in your book too. So very grateful for that. So
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah, but yeah, so my story for those that don't know who I am, I guess, that might not have listened to the first episode, I built an agency called Hennessy Digital. Agency was about 10 years old before I sold it. I use the air quotes when I say sold it because it's a different type of setup, I guess. So a private equity group approached us not to retire Jason Hennessy, but to help accelerate the growth of what was already working. And so I like to say I didn't sell out, I sold in, I guess is the better way to kind of put it. And so I am still the CEO of Hennessy Digital. I certainly did take some chips off of the table, but I believed in what we were building at this new platform level. So the private equity group is called Trinity Hunt. The platform is called Herringbone Digital. I was acquisition number 2. I believed in the thesis of what they were building. And so I took a lot of those chips that I took off the table and I pushed a lot back in. I'm still running the vision of my agency. I'm also helping to create a better product for all of our brother and sister agencies. I think we've acquired 6 other agencies since Hennessy Digital. We focus on legal, which is where my specialty comes in, home services, elective medicine, and then dental. So those are the 4 verticals that we focus on.
Awesome. We're going to do a big dive into everything you just said there. Because again, I want to go behind the scenes. I want to know like what it actually takes to sell an agency. Because a lot of people, you know, you see the podcast up and down. It's like, oh, we sold for 9x, whatever. So I want to know the whole, you know, the dirty bit of it. So first of all, let's go back, Jason, to you've been running Hennessy for, you know, well over a decade.
Yep.
When was the actual moment? Because I've heard you talk about, you know, the difference from having a lifestyle business to, you know, actually getting to an exit. So when was the actual moment you decided that, okay, this isn't a lifestyle business anymore. The plan is to exit?
Yeah. So that determination was made a lot earlier. So that was, so we were probably about maybe like 3.5 million top line revenue when I made the decision to kind of pivot from a lifestyle business to something that was going to be more of a scalable asset. And in order to do that, anybody that's listening to this podcast is probably entrepreneurial. And so I think being an entrepreneur is an amazing thing. It's kind of like a quick start button to getting a business started, but then you can become a danger to yourself. I don't think entrepreneurs are groomed to scale. I think they can kind of quickly accelerate, but then things potentially could start to break, if you don't get out of your own way and put more competent people in place that can kind of take a business to the next level. And so, again, I came to that realization when I was about 3.5 million in revenue. I then brought in a very competent COO who then helped me to recruit a CFO and then a CTO. And so I had great leadership. And then we just started to add layered management. We started to put better systems and processes in place, setting goals, holding people more accountable, all of the stuff that you have to do in order to scale. And that was the year that we went from like 3.5 million to like 8 million in 1 year, just because of those. I like to say I made very expensive choices to bring in very competent people, but that paid off. That bet paid off. And then from there, we ended up making the Inc. 500 that year. I think we were like 290 on the list, fastest growing private companies in the United States. And then every year thereafter, we continued to kind of grow and accelerate. And, and sometimes along the journey, it becomes uncomfortable. Like you could grow yourself out of business if you're not careful. I mean, there were times where we were at, I want to say like over $10-12 million in top line revenue, where I was scared because like we had 3 pay periods and I was going to have to move money out of a personal account just to cover that 3rd pay period, right? Just because of either cash flow or, our margins were really low. Our margins were at one point were like 7% just because we were like really like building out senior level leadership. But again, all those bets kind of eventually kind of paid off, and we could talk more about like pivoting towards the exit, but you asked more about like scaling, so.
Awesome. I love that. And okay, so let's go on when you sold that. So when you made the decision, we need to build Hennessy to actually sell, what actually changed in the business for that to happen? Because I've heard from several different people that when you're selling a business, it's very, very different to running a business.
Yeah, it is. It's a different strategy, when you're like in the growth mode, you don't care about profitability or that word EBITDA, you know what I mean? Like you just want to continue to reinvest back into the business and back into the growth and, pay the least amount of taxes, you know what I mean? Truthfully, so like at the end of the year, it's like, hey, what invoices for tools that we can pay off this year for next year? You know what I mean? You're just kind of like trying to do that dance and hiring people. Like, there was a point where like there would be like a team member that'd be like, hey, we really need to hire a new account manager. Or like, are you sure you don't need 2 or 3? You know what I mean? Like, let's just kind of grow. You're kind of in that growth mindset. Whereas when you make the decision that, hey, I think we want to sell, first, I think it's probably like a 2 or 3 year journey when you make that decision. Like, it's not like you wake up one morning and you're like, I think I want to sell. I mean, if you're selling out of pressure, then you lose all your leverage, right? I mean, if your like business is kind of going in the different direction and you're going down and you're forced to sell, then you lose all the leverage, right? But if you want to actually gain and keep that leverage, right, it's more of like a 2 or 3 year journey. So when we made this decision to sell, we were like, hey, I think it was 2024. We were really focused on just profitability. We're like, hey, I think in order for us to kind of take the business to the next level, we're going to need, more capital. I've got a lot of ideas that I want to bring to life. And unfortunately, my team kind of limits me to 3 big ideas a year, just because we can't fund all of the ideas that I bring to the table, right? We don't have the resources to do that. So I'm limited to 3 big ideas a year. And then we build a team around it and we build systems and processes to kind of build that out. And so I'm like, if we really want to start to accelerate the growth, maybe we look at bringing in a private equity partner to kind of, give us some capital, kind of take this to the next level. So 2024 was the year that we really just kind of focused on profitability. You know what I mean? Like, how are we more lean? If somebody wants to hire somebody, they need to build a business case, and how could we do more with less? How do we stop spending so foolishly on sponsorships and conferences and, other things? Jason stopped flying first class and started sitting in the back of the plane, that year, stuff like that, and so that was the year that we got our profitability and our EBITDA up to like 4.7 million, which is really tough to do. You know what I mean? Like, cause it's like in hindsight now, like now I'm on the buyer side. And so it's not very often that you come across like agencies that have 5 million, 10 million in EBITDA. You know what I mean? That's very rare. And so we were successful. We were able to get our EBITDA about 4.7, 4.8 million. And that was the first year, right? And so the second year, we wanted to get our EBITDA closer to like 7 and 8 million. And then by the end of 2027, we wanted to get our EBITDA up to like 10 million. And then at that point, we were going to actually sell. And so 8 months into our thesis, we got approached by the private equity group. Any person that is going to sell a business should take those meetings, with, people that are real buyers. Regardless of whether or not you're going to take the deal, right? You want to start to build the relationships now and nurture those relationships. And so we took a couple meetings with some private equity groups. Some were strategic, some were not. Some would have actually paid me a lot more money if I would have sold, but it might have killed the culture of the company. It might not have been the best decision for our clients, right? So any decision that I was going to make had to check 3 boxes. Is it good for my team? Is it good for my customers? And then is it good for me, right? In that order, basically. And then from there, we got approached. We took a meeting about 8 months into our journey, and initially we said, no, we're going to hold off. And then they came back and they said, look, we really we know that you're one of the leaders in legal. We'd love to kind of bring you into the platform. We think that if you come on board, it could also help accelerate us with future acquisitions as well. And we'd like to make you a board member. And then we kind of structured them like, well, why would I sell now? I'm like, I know that in a year from now, my EBITDA is going to be at like 7 million, 8 million. So like, I want to hold out. And they're like, well, Jason, we can actually structure the deal so that if you say that you're going to hit that earnout, you know what I mean? We can actually structure it so that we'll put some money aside. If you actually hit that, then we'll pay you that a year later, And so it just made a lot of sense to kind of do it at that point. And now I'm super excited because we are like fast tracked. Since then I think our goal was to acquire 10 million in EBITDA in the first year. And so we were basically half of that. And I think that first year we acquired 25 million in EBITDA. So I think at this point we're like about 110 million top line with, 30 million EBITDA right now. So like we are nobody's ever seen anything like this right now.
Oh, man. It's so fascinating. I've got a million questions on the back of all of that. But okay, so let's go back to so Affinity Partners. You had that meeting with them. Obviously, EBITDA was really important to them. You guys were growing really, really fast. What was the one thing that they dug into you guys that kind of took you by surprise?
Well, I think it's one of those things that even my business coach, everybody says, be careful, private equity, they show up with smiles, right? But in the background, you know what I mean? They've got like, sledgehammers, you know what I mean? It's just like, I think my business coach even said like, just be very careful, because private equity groups will kind of get you onto the roof and then pull down the ladder, and then you're stuck on the roof, you know what I mean? And so I belong to a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And so there's a lot of peers and people, like very, very successful people all over the world, not just in the United States. And so I reached out to about 6 of my friends that have sold to private equity. And I reached out, I'm like, hey, I know you sold to private equity 2 years ago. How did you get screwed over? Next phone call. I know you sold to private equity. How did you get screwed over? You know what I mean? And I basically just took notes of everybody that sold to private equity, arming myself so that when, I was structuring my LOI and my purchase agreement, that we can kind of just be very clear up front, like this is the expectations, right? I spent more time negotiating my LOI up front, which, was, somebody that recommended that to me. And so, but the thing that surprised me, to answer your question, was that they didn't pull any punches. I mean, they were the real deal. They showed up with smiles on their face. Now we are, over a year later since I sold, and we still are smiling together. They stayed true to everything that they said they were going to do. They didn't come in and, fire my leadership team and, and kill my culture and, optimize the agency from a spreadsheet, behind the scenes. Like, those are the stories, the horror stories that you hear with some private equity groups, but that's not been my experience.
And how dependent was the business on you personally when the process began?
For the sales side, believe it or not, I had good counsel, right? So I had a really good attorney. I had a great CPA firm. Our team was incredible. A lot of times where deals die right off the bat is in the financials, right? It's like numbers are overstated. Entrepreneurs are living their personal life, on their agency. You're trying to justify, why did the owner take out a $300,000, cash distribution, so that was not our story at all. Like, I took a salary, I took a distribution every month. I never really took money out of the business, like on a whim like that. Right. So we had the cleanest financials ever. Right. And so, there wasn't really a lot of, debate on that. Again, that's where I think most deals kind of fall down, right? It's because, on the initial call, you're like, oh, tell us a little bit about yourself. And it's like, oh yeah, we're a $10 million agency with 40% margin. And it's like, oh, that's great, right? And then once you kind of sign the LOI and they start digging in, it's like, wait a second, 3 million of that is from one client, So if they could lose that one client, that's gonna kill it, And then there's another $2 million is that really right? So that's where I guess things kind of fall apart. And then from there you lose trust, and then there's bickering and back and forth. There's leverage game, and the deal just kind of goes sideways. So I think the advantage that I had is I had a great CFO that had really good books. And then my COO, Scott, also took a very much leadership role, with getting everything that the private equity group required, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in diligence.
How important do you think your personal brand was to the sell? Obviously, it's very important to you growing the business, but the actual sell, you've got multiple books, you're very well known in the industry, you're on YPO member, all of that. How do you think that played into the sell?
Yeah, I would always think that could be seen as a disadvantage. And it very well could have been if it was a different buyer, right? Because if the goal was to, buy the agency and then maybe replace Jason with somebody cheaper, or maybe they wanted to get some Harvard, educated CEO to kind of take the helm of the agency to the next level, then I guess that could have been seen as a disadvantage, right? Because it's like, or maybe they wouldn't want to buy it because if Jason leaves, what happens to the agency? So that could be a big disadvantage, right? But the way in which that this private equity's thesis was written, they wanted to find founders that were interested in staying on, and again, put more capital and infrastructure behind them to accelerate the growth, and lean into the fact that Jason has a very strong brand, not only in the legal side, but also the agency world, the SEO world too, right? Because, I might be able to go out and recruit, somebody in the SEO space. And we recently did this too, by the way, but recruit somebody in the SEO space that I wouldn't have been able to afford, right? That might not have taken, a phone call from some random private equity group too, right? So we're leveraging it from the recruiting aspect. We're leveraging it from the buy side now, because like our merger and acquisition team will send an email to somebody that we might be interested in buying that just goes unanswered, right? You know what I mean? I send an email to the same person, right? Within 5 minutes, like we get like a response, you know what I mean? So like we're definitely leveraging that a lot. And so I think in my case, it actually was a benefit. And I ended up getting a higher multiple as a result of building a strong personal brand.
Yeah, I love that, because even when we were hiring with you guys, my team said that they've never had such positive feedback when somebody mentioned Hennessy Digital or Jason Hennessy. Like everybody's face lit up, like everybody was like bought into it straight away. And then again, you guys have got such an employer value proposition of the mentoring, the team that you guys have and everything. So I want to talk about that, Jason. First of all, how did you break it to your team? Did you break it to your team that the plan was to sell, so it wasn't a surprise, or what was the plan there?
Yeah, so we are so overly transparent with our leadership team, with our clients, with our staff, and even with the open market too. And so we didn't tip anybody off, that we were potentially looking at finding like a private equity partner, because again, our goal wasn't necessarily to sell. Right? Like our goal was to find a capital partner to help accelerate the growth. Right. So that was my whole mission. Right. And if that didn't exist, I might not have sold, you know what I mean? Like I might have just kind of continued with the journey. And so, as we were kind of going through it, we were just focused more on profitability. I just look at that as just running a good business. You know what I mean? We just kind of were running a good business. And then once things started to kind of get serious and we started to take meetings, for the most part, we kind of kept it within the C-suite, so it was me, Michelle, Patrick, which is my CFO, and then Scott, who's our COO. Then eventually, like there was questions about technology. And so we brought our CTO in. Then there was questions about, after the LOI was signed, about like client list, and we brought in our director or our senior director of client service in. And so those that needed to know knew. The reason why we didn't tell everybody is because it could have easily have just died. You know what I mean? It could have like gotten, just for whatever reason, just kind of the deal just didn't happen, right? And so I didn't want to cause a lot of confusion with the company. I didn't want to like get anybody worried, because there is a high likelihood that it doesn't happen too. After it actually happened, right? So after everything was kind of closed, then before that, we were working on a communication plan. It's like, okay, so like, it looks like it's about to happen. The purchase agreement is in our hands. The lawyers have went back and forth. We like what it says. How do we now communicate this, to the world? There's some of my colleagues that have sold, that have different agencies, even in the same space, that chose not to communicate with their staff, that chose not to communicate with their clients, right? Like, and so that was definitely not the playbook I wanted to run. I wanted to kind of just be loud, vocal, and just tell the story as it is, so that this way I control the narrative and I don't let other people kind of control the narrative for me. And so we had a call with our full team. We broke the news to them. We had a call with our leadership team, I think before that, broke the news to them. Told everybody why we did the deal, why I'm excited by it, that hey, Jason's not going anywhere. We're not going to like just start cutting people, you know what I mean? So like there's all of that. And then from there, I actually like set up like 15-minute phone calls with like almost every one of my clients. And it was just me with them on the call. And I just kind of broke the news. I'm like, hey, just want to let you know, we brought in a private equity partner. We're super excited. Here's all the reasons why we did this. Here's all the reasons why I'm excited for you, why we did this. And so I had one-on-one phone calls with just about all of my clients. The ones that I couldn't get in touch with for whatever reason, maybe they were busy or whatnot, then I also created a video that then went out to all of their clients. And then from there, we announced it to the world. You know what I mean? We did press releases, I did podcasts, and I just kind of went loud and bold. And, I think it was very receptive. Later on in hindsight, like we actually took clients from other agencies where like the one thing that I appreciate about you, Jason, is even though that you kind of sold, like you told the world about it. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, I've never seen anything like that, And so actually it was pretty well received within the industry.
Yeah. I mean, in my head, it's only a win-win. Like you're just adding flame to the fire and you're staying on. So did anybody take it negatively?
There was a couple clients. It's like, okay, you know what I mean? Like I'll believe you, you know what I mean? But I've seen this before, and I know what private equity does, and we'll see. Let's talk again in a year. You know what I mean? There are a couple people that are a little skeptical. You know what I mean? But I'm like, look, I've always kind of stayed true to my word. You know what I mean? I like to say I live a very a life filled with integrity and morals and values and things like that. And so take me for my word and let's have that conversation in a year. You know what I mean? And so it's been, like I said, over a year now. And I think, our services have gone up. We're using agencies like you now, right, to kind of go out and help us recruit the best people. You know what I mean? So that's not the playbook from private equity, right? I mean, it's how could we not spend more money? You know what I mean? So anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And then so, Jason, throughout the whole journey of when you decided, right, the plan is to bring in another group to help us grow even more. From that whole journey, is there anything that you learned from that if you were to do it again, you would have either done sooner or you would have acted on it faster?
I think, I honestly, I don't think, that like in hindsight, was there a lot of lessons, I think there's certain like terms that, at the end, it moved a lot faster, just because, when you're trying to close a deal, it always gets pushed back. It's like, hey, we're going to close on Monday, right? It's like, but wait, the lawyers still need to look at this and we need to amend that, right? And then it's like, all right, well, we have to get it done by this date. And so things started to kind of move a lot faster at the end. There was like one thing that was like at the end of the deal that is just like everything kind of moved, we signed. And I think there was like one little thing that like caused a little confusion. Like we took it one way, the private equity took it another way, and it was kind of like the difference between, I don't know, call it like $150,000, like in working capital, like later on. And so at the end of the deal, it's like, after it's like, I think the way in which we interpreted it, we owed the private equity group owed us $150,000. And the way they wrote it, like, we owe them $150,000, right? So it's just like, this is like, oh man, that's not how we interpreted this. And they're like, oh, we're sorry, this is the way it was written, right? But to show how fair and balanced like our private equity group is, they're just like, look, if you guys interpreted this way and we wrote it this way, let's just split it and just kind of make it even. You know what I mean? And not all private equities would have done that, man. They stand by the language that the attorneys wrote. And so, like stuff like that. And there's been multiple instances where our private equity group has done nothing but being north of fair with stuff like that.
That's awesome. I love stories like that. So, Jason, I think I seen a LinkedIn post from you a few months ago. So it was something, I think you were traveling to Miami to either a law event or something. And the whole story was that you used to be doing it for the last few years, and the goal was to sign new clients when you go over. Now the goal is to look at other law agencies to take under your wing.
That's
So
right.
first of all, that must be so much fun to kind of do. But when you're doing that, what are you looking for?
Yeah, that's the beauty about this, is because I've been in the industry for so long, nearly 2 decades in the SEO industry, and, over a decade in the legal industry. So I know, who are the A players in the space, right? I know the agencies that have good service that we compete against. We'll often lose clients to these agencies. Sometimes we'll take clients from these agencies, but usually, when a law firm is kind of doing their due diligence and they're looking for like a digital marketing partner, it comes down to like 5 or 7 different agencies, right? And so like that's top of my list. Like, how can we kind of, maybe look at some of the better agencies that have good operators where the founders want to stick around. So we were able to bring over one of those agencies, an agency by the name of Blue Shark Digital. Seth Price, long time friend. In fact, he was like my first client in legal many, many years ago. And so he was like at the top of the list, you know what I mean? Like, hey, because we, for the most part, like work really in the like the upper market, you know what I mean? Whereas they also work in the upper market, but then they also have a lot of products for mid-market as well. Whereas we really don't have a lot of mid-market products. And so I'm like, that would be the perfect agency to go get that has like a mid-market solution, right? Because it could be more of like a downsell for Hennessy as well. Got him interested. I don't think he would have did the deal if I didn't do the deal. You know what I mean? Like, but got him interested, and then he eventually came on to the platform. Then there's 2 other people that are rock stars in the space. There's a group called CJ Advertising, and Mickey and Chad that run that agency. And then there's other people behind the scenes too, don't get me wrong, but they're kind of the faces of it. I'm like, oh my God, it'd be great if we can get them too, boom. And they do more like TV and media buys and things like that, and have very loyal clients. Clients have been with them for like 25, 30 years, you know what I mean? And so that was another acquisition that we brought in. And I also know who the not so great players are, you know what I mean? There's been times where our merger and acquisition team says, hey, got a great, interest from this agency over here. What do you think about it? I'm like, oh my God, like, you know what I mean? Like, here's a couple of reasons why we might, not want to do that deal, you know what I mean? For whatever reason, so they do have like true insight into the industry like that.
Awesome. And okay, so let's follow up on that then, on the industry. The industry is obviously changing a lot right now. People are scared of SEO. You've got massive deals like Adobe buying SEMrush. You've got guys giving you guys money, and user growing like mad. So what's your thoughts, Jason, on where the industry is right now?
I haven't been more excited about being in this industry in years, you know what I mean? Because for a long time, we've all been following like, the same playbook, optimizing for Google, you know what I mean? Google, right? And so, when we started to hear about ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude and Gemini and Google AI overviews, you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, like, is this truly the end of SEO? Like, is SEO dead? Like, okay, maybe like I will, I will buy into that, right? But, as we started to, reverse engineer how these different large language models work, it became very apparent that SEO serves as the foundation, to show up on a lot of these large language models. But there's still that level of complexity that we, as those that study patterns and understand algorithms, have to kind of go to kind of learn again, right? And so say it 70% is kind of the foundational SEO stuff with content and authority and citations and technical infrastructure of websites, right? But that other 30% is like, okay, that's the stuff that we got to figure out again. And so that excites me because, now I'm kind of having to learn something new again. I'm spending a lot of time trying to understand it. I'm hiring people, that have already figured it out in a big way, that have, done this for Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies. And so it's fascinating to me. And now we're building out like proprietary tools and a full team, and we're changing our systems and processes. And I'm getting phone calls and emails from clients, saying, oh my God, like we just signed one of our biggest cases ever, and they found us from ChatGPT, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's cool, you know what I mean? So I'm really excited for the future.
Awesome. Okay, I love that last bit that you said. So you've got clients ringing you up that people are finding them on ChatGPT. How do you, or are you still doing it, or are we past that point where you're still having to educate clients on the power of, showing up on AI search, all of that?
Yeah. Because in the absence of you not educating, you're at the mercy of another agency that comes in, that educates your clients and potentially pulls your clients away, right? Even if we are sophisticated, we historically have been Hennessy Digital. We're the SEO agency for law firms, right? So we have to kind of reinvent ourselves. We have to pivot, right? And the only way to do that is the way in which we built Hennessy Digital, by educating, right? I wrote a book, Law Firm SEO, right? I wrote another book called Honest SEO, right? I'm a big person in educating. I go out and speak on stages. I stay in tune, with the industry. I like to say I'm an SEO that somehow became a CEO, you know what I mean? Right? That's kind of like my journey. And so I still have to stay true to the fact that SEO was my passion. That was my drive. And so now it's more GEO, AI optimization. I've got a new passion for that. And so, the only way that I can continue to educate my audience is doing the same thing that I've done, and so going on stage, speaking on the stuff that I'm learning, doing a lot of testing within some of our own sites. And we even do a podcast too. So not a podcast, a webinar that we do once a month, which is on our website, Hennessy.com. So every month, we do a whole new webinar where we get a couple hundred people that show up, and we just educate them on this. So I think it's important that we continue what Hennessy Digital was originally built on, which is education.
Awesome. I love that. And okay, so Jason, you said that you were originally an SEO that became a CEO. So obviously a lot of those business lessons came from growing your own business, doing it firsthand. How beneficial were things like YPO for you?
Super beneficial. And I say that because when you're the CEO of a company and everybody reports to you, every idea that you have, is a good idea, right? There's nobody at the company for the most part, I like to say Scott, who's my CEO, he's my no person, right? I give him permission to kind of tell me no, you know what I mean? Or maybe not no, but at least not right now. Hey, Jason, that's a great idea, but just not right now, right? And it kind of keeps us focused. It keeps us not getting distracted. But in most cases, if you don't have a good COO that tells you no, every good idea that you come up with is something that you execute on. And so YPO is one of those places that you can get really raw and vulnerable with business problems, you know what I mean? And you have peers that have also gone through similar problems, just with different industries. And so these are not conversations that you just have with maybe your wife, right? That is not in the business, or with your cousin, right? You know what I mean? At a barbecue, right? You know what I mean? You want to kind of get real feedback from people that also lived it and have experienced it, maybe having to lay off people, or promotions, or selling a business to a private equity group, you know what I mean? And so without that YPO network, you know what I mean, I don't know if I would have made the best decisions, and I would be sitting here and talking to you. It might have been a different story, right? And so that's the cool thing about finding a group, whether it's YPO or Vistage or EO. I mean, there's a lot of those organizations out there, but just finding a group of peers that you can speak to in confidence, get really raw, get really vulnerable, not just in business too, in life. You know what I mean? We've dealt with people that were going through divorces. We dealt with people that had to start to figure out ways to take care of aging parents. I mean, there's all kinds of issues that come up, and it remains very confidential. We don't talk about it, right? But we help each other solve each other's problems, so that's been instrumental in my career.
Awesome. I've gone through something similar recently. I've another company, salaryguide.com, and so it's a B2B SaaS, and it's completely benign to anything that I've ever done. It's like completely different to like the agency model, all of that. So I wanted to get a mentor for it. So when I reached out to a few people, and the guy is the cost of him for 60 minutes is more than I used to pay myself monthly for like the first 3 years of the business. Right. But he's done exactly where I want to go, and the amount of value I've got from him is like absolutely insane. So you've talked a lot on our last podcast and briefly here about your business coach that helped you basically go to the moon. Yep. How did you, first of all, pick that person? And secondly, like, put your trust in them?
Yeah. So that story is interesting. So my business coach, his name is Cameron Harold. I like to say like the universe put him into my life and I manifested him as my business coach. I don't know, it's probably like 10, 12 years. Well, actually, it was a lot earlier than that. It was probably like 16, 17 years ago, I'd say, that I was just watching YouTube and a video appeared on my YouTube feed. And it was a TED Talk of Cameron speaking in Canada about raising children to be entrepreneurs, right? And so he just kind of gave this full TED Talk about how he was a C student in high school. He sucked at French, right? But all of his teachers and his parents said that you got to be better at French, so let's get you a tutor in French, right? But he was really good at like debate and public speaking, right? And so like, why are they getting me like a tutor in something I suck at that I hate, right? Instead of getting me a tutor in like being better as a public speaker, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's backwards, right? He was the kid that was selling, golf balls on golf courses. Like, you go collect balls and sell them for 25 cents. And he had like that entrepreneurial hustle. And anyway, and so this whole video just kind of resonated with me. I'm like, oh my God, this guy speaks my language. I'm like, oh. So like I bought his books, I followed him on social media, and anytime he talked, he just kind of inspired me. And so fast forward many, many, many years later, as Hennessy Digital was growing, I'm like, okay, we're now at $5 million top line. Maybe I could afford to kind of bring this guy in to be my business coach. He doesn't know me at this point, right? So then I wrote this like really amazing email that, I thought was very funny and witty and complimentary, and kind of told a story about how he came into my life, and then I sent it over to him. I'm like, all right, it's either going to get ignored, he's going to say no, or maybe he'll say yes, right? And so that's the power of life, I think, is like, in life, if you take action, you have the power of creating a future that won't exist, right? That's kind of like the motto that I live by. And so if I didn't take action and email him, I would never had him as a coach. I probably wouldn't have joined YPO because that was a recommendation of him. I definitely wouldn't have written my books because, again, those were recommendations from him, right? But I took action, sent the email, nothing to lose. He then replied within 12 minutes, right? Oh my God, that was the best email I ever got. Of course, I'd love to coach you. Let's jump on a call. He copied his executive assistant and we set it up. And then from there, then built, a great friendship. And he was just somebody that we would pick his brains, me and my COO, Scott, and we would take notes, and there'd be action items from every meeting, with Cameron. And, if I go back and look at some of those action items, like, oh my God, like, look at that. Like 9 years ago, like, he told me I needed an executive assistant because I was the executive assistant without one. You know what I mean? It's like, what would I live like if I didn't have my executive assistant? So like things like that in hindsight, like, it's funny to kind of see the progress.
I love that. Did 18-year-old Jason think that you'd be where you are today?
I say this humbly, but I think ever since I was 9 years old, I always knew that that I would achieve some level of financial success. And that was my primary driver in life, right? And it's only because I didn't come from anything at all. Like my mom was 17 when she had me. She cleaned houses. My grandparents helped raise me. We were very like poor kind of growing up, right? And so I remember my mom, when she would clean houses, she would drive into these fancy neighborhoods, like kind of like the neighborhoods that I live in now, right? Like she'd drive into these fancy neighborhoods and she'd pull up in her car that wouldn't start in the morning, you know what I mean? And like she'd get out and I would walk in with her and I'd sit on the couch and read a comic book or whatever I was doing. And she would, I'd see her work so hard, you know what I mean, to kind of clean this big house and scrubbing toilets and all this other stuff, and at the end of it, they would give her like an envelope with $60 in it or something like that, you know what I mean? And so like, and so that, seeing my mom hustle like that, but I remember like I would be in a car with her and I'd be like, Mom, someday, like I'm going to live in a neighborhood like this, you know what I mean? Like, and I just knew, like, I always had that drive. Like I kind of manifested that early, and that became my primary kind of driver for all the wrong or right reasons. I was very money motivated. And so, so if you ask 18-year-old Jason, like, would I see myself like this? It's either I was going to be homeless, in the streets, you know what I mean, or living like this, right? But I made a lot of bad decisions. I learned from the bad decisions. I got better, and I progressed over time, I guess.
I love that. And Jason, honestly, I could ask you a million questions, but my last one for you is, what's next for Jason Hennessy?
Yeah, so like this whole new journey about this whole M&A world and buying businesses and figuring out ways to integrate the businesses and making our products better across the multiple agencies that we bring into the portfolio. That's the stuff that really excites me. And so, I'm spending some of my time on the M&A side, trying to find new deals, bring new deals in, whether I'm going to speak at conferences that are focused on mergers and acquisitions or talking with other agency owners, right? So that's somewhat of my time. And then the whole, just kind of accelerating the growth of our platform and making our product better. So like, that's the stuff that like drives me. I think I checked most of the financial goals in my life, you know what I mean? So it's not about the money at this point and at all. Now it's just, okay, how can we build something really big that just improves the level of the product that we deliver to our clients, right? I don't want anybody to ever say that there's a better agency than Hennessy Digital for legal. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to kind of build it so like we are the standard, right? And so that's the mission that I'm on right now.
Awesome. If it's not on your radar, I'd love you to write a book on the whole experience of everything and the whole M&A stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will. I've been thinking about it, and so I will certainly consider that. And you'll be the first to know when it goes live, and I'll get you a signed copy. So, but thank you.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. Every link below is going to lead you right to Jason. So thank you so much, Jason.
I appreciate it, Josh.
Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're an agency owner that is wanting to scale and wants to continue bringing your business to new heights and doesn't want to put everything on pause for hiring and finding the best talent that's out there in SEO and paid media, well, that's something I can help with. I own a recruitment company that has specialized in both the SEO and paid media sector, and we work with 100+ businesses. So I'm going to leave 2 links below. There's no big pitch here, but if you want to talk over strategy and hiring and how myself and my team can find you the best A-player talent in both the SEO and paid media sector, then please book in, and I look forward to talking to you. Thank you.